Okay, now we are all being recorded, and I will turn it over to Bishop Dennis. So everyone's just going to have to speak up. So I think at this point, the audio is coming through my computer, not through those microphones.
Not working.
They're not working.
Okay, so all right. Good morning. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming on. Again, we apologize for the delay, but that's technology for you. Real quick, let's go ahead and get our roll call done today. District 1.
Pete Fitzpatrick for District 1.
Thank you, Peter. District 2.
Karen Williams.
Karen, welcome, Karen. District 3, yours truly. District 4, welcome, new member.
Stephanie Betterson, present.
Welcome, Stephanie. District 5.
Renee Stride, present.
And Renee. District 6.
Afternoon, Scott Richmond, present.
Hey, Scott. District 7.
Sean Fewer, present.
Don. And members at large.
Nigeria Rolling Ford, present.
In Nigeria. Carol's not here? All right, Carol is absent today. Thank all of you again for taking the time to come to our meeting today. We appreciate you so very much. You were sent copies of our minutes from the last meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them and noted any corrections or things that should be added. If you have done so and you're ready to accept those minutes, I will accept the motion to do so.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented from our February 10th meeting.
Second.
Properly moved and second that we accept the minutes from our last meeting. You've heard the motion. The time to consider, prepared to vote. All those in favor, let it be known by the word aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? All right. Thank you so very much for accepting those minutes from our last meeting. We have a new member with us today, Stephanie Betterson. Stephanie, thank you for coming on. Would you just give us a bird's eye shot of who Stephanie Betterson is? And
I certainly will. My name is Stephanie Betterson, of course. I live in District 4, which is at Randallstown area community. I've been in the community for probably the last 30 to 40 years. I have two children, two grown children, let me add. I'm married, and we currently reside in the Randallstown area, and I look forward to working with you all to kind of participate in this board.
thank you, Stephanie. Welcome to the Police Accountability Board. With us today, we've got Captain Brian Shanks from the Baltimore County Police Department. Welcome, Captain. And you're welcome to share with us today anything that you would like to share.
And you want to come just closer to the table, just in case the audio, I have no idea how far these pick up, so.
I don't want to take too much of everyone's time, but first, thank you very much for having me. Again, my name is Brian Shanks. I serve as a captain with the Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. I've been there since about September. Before that, I was with our Community and Behavioral Health Support Section for the last 7 years. That's really where my passion is. But I am enjoying what I'm learning now with new endeavors, new challenges, learning the internal affairs process. That being said, I'm here to represent Chief McCullough and Major McWorman, both of whom had previous commitments today. They apologize for not being able to be here today, but I'm here to represent the department. One of the things that we wanted to express is that we are seeing a leveling of cases back to our pre-2023 levels of on intake, which is a good thing. I think the process looks like it's working. We're learning it. We're working well. That being said, we do very much appreciate the good working relationship we have with the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee. We want to continue that. That good working relationship is being shown through efforts by the acronym PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, is actually using Baltimore County and the state of Maryland as an example on a national best practices study that they're compiling. They're using our data and data from all the other law enforcement agencies within the state. But we just held a forum about 2 weeks ago at our headquarters, spearheaded by PERF, and they were very pleased with the stats and the work that they're seeing, particularly by the Baltimore County Police Department and a lot of the other agencies within the state of Maryland. which a lot goes to the legislature and the work of all of you, your colleagues around the state. So thank you again for that. The last thing I have is work is still in progress about moving our offices. Our officers are within the public safety building at 700 East Joppa Road. National best practices show that internal affairs probably should not be in police headquarters to make it more open and receptive to folks who want to make a complaint. So we will be moving right down the street here to 305 Washington Avenue. For Baltimore County, we'll have some other government entities. We will be in that locale very shortly. I know demolition has already occurred on the office space and renovations are already taking place. We've been told a September date. Little Birdie's told us that they may actually be ahead of schedule, so it could be an early summer move, but that's coming. So that's another good thing for us. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions for Captain Shank?
Any update on Officer Wilkins?
I know he has been discharged. He's doing fine. I know the administrative review of that is still going underway,
Yeah.
but he's doing fine. Looks like he should make a full recovery. Thank you for asking.
Any other questions for our captain? Thank you so very much.
You got it, sir.
Please give our regards to the chief, and we always appreciate you all attending.
Will do, sir.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
There's a question in the chat.
There is, it's a public comment though, so we'll reserve it to the end. I can answer the question as well, given this circumstances. We'll just wait in public comment to thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
I know the next one is Deputy Chief Sheriff Black. He, last minute unable to attend. However, there are no pending complaints or disciplinary matters against members of the Baltimore County Sheriff's Office, which has been the case for, they've had one case that the ACC has heard since the inception of the ACC. So not much in the way of complaints.
Okay. Good. Thanks for sharing that. All right. With that being said, we're down to item D, the review and recap of the Administrative Charging Committee proceedings. Our own beloved Dawn.
All right. The Administrative Charging Committee met in the first quarter of 2025 on January 3rd, January 27th, February 7th, and March 7th. We reviewed and deliberated 73 cases and rendered 73 opinions. Of the 73 cases, all involved Baltimore County Police Department members. Of the 73 cases, there were a total of 15 use of force cases. And the details are 3 departmental accidents, 2 charged, 1 not charged, 15 rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, 15 not charged, 6 use of force policy violations, 6 not charged, 5 harassment, 5 not charged, 6 investigation procedure policy violation, 5 were charged, 5 were not charged, 1 was charged. 2 complaints for racial bias, discrimination, or profiling, 2 not charged. 1 complaint including a use of force policy violation, failure to provide medical care, false arrest, writing an inaccurate report, and body-worn camera policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for use of force policy violation and racial bias, discrimination, or profiling, not charged. 1 complaint with use of force policy violation, failure to provide medical care, body-worn camera policy violation, violating prisoner property policy. That case was not charged for the use of force and failure to provide medical care, was charged for the body-worn camera violation and violating prisoner property policy. 1 complaint for body-worn camera violation and conduct unbecoming of a Baltimore County police officer, charged for both. 1 complaint, use of force policy violation and rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, not charged for the use of force, was charged for the rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language. 1 complaint for rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, and failure to write a required report, not charged. 2 complaints involving use of force policy violation and failure to identify self, not charged. 2 complaints for rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, and false arrest, 2 not charged. 1 complaint for failure to make a required arrest and an unlawful threat to arrest, not charged. 1 complaint for violation of rules and regulations of the National Crime Information Center and Maryland Criminal Justice Database, charged. We're halfway there. 1 complaint for conduct unbecoming of a Baltimore County police officer, not charged. 1 complaint for failure to accurately document information in a charging document or warrant during an investigation and improper search or seizure, not charged. 2 complaints for sexual offense or assault, 2 not charged. 1 complaint for failure to provide medical aid and investigation procedure policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for medical treatment violation and prisoner property policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for violating motor vehicle laws, not charged. 1 complaint for use of force policy violation and body worn camera policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for use of force policy violation, vehicle pursuit policy violation, and rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, charged for all 3 of those. 1 complaint for failure to write a required report, charged. 1 complaint for failure to take necessary police action, not charged. 2 complaints for rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, and failure to provide name and ID, 2 not charged. 1 complaint for investigation procedure policy violation and failure to write an incident report, not charged. 1 complaint for investigation procedure policy violation and failure to write a required report, not charged. 1 complaint for use of force policy violation and investigation procedure policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for improper vehicle seizure, not charged. 1 complaint for improper arrest and search policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for improper arrest, search policy violation, and body worn camera policy violation, not charged. 1 complaint for failure to take a citizen complaint against a Baltimore County police officer, not charged. 1 complaint for investigation procedure policy violation and rude or discourteous, unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, not charged. 1 complaint for rude, discourteous, or unprofessional behavior, conduct, or language, and failure to take necessary police action, not charged. 1 complaint for failure to take necessary police action and failure to provide name and ID, not charged. And 1 search, seizure, or entry procedure violation, not charged.
Dawn,
Any questions
any questions for
that I'm able
Dawn?
to answer?
Any questions for Dawn?
It's not really for Dawn, but it's for communication. Do you think we could ask, for the next meeting for them to come with the police department to come with a refresher on the body worn camera procedure?
Or policy, yes, we
Yeah.
can,
Good idea.
yeah,
It seems
absolutely.
like that's coming up a lot.
Happy to do that, and they'd be happy to provide that information. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. We really appreciate your work. Thank you so much. You asked for that for the next meeting, Peter?
Yeah, it's available, yeah.
Body worn camera
Yeah,
procedure.
review of the procedure, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, they can go over the policy, what constitutes a
Yeah.
violation, when, what, how those come up, those things.
Yeah, great idea.
And in general, this for all members, if you have a question similar to that on any policy matter in the department, they're happy to answer that. They're happy to provide the policy and explain it as well.
Excellent. Excellent. All righty. Information concerning upcoming trial boards.
That's me.
That's-
Thank you, Chair. And I'm also gonna add into this a little bit of information on legislation of note this year. But starting on trial boards, the last time that the PAB met was February 10th. Since then, 4 trial boards have been held. I'm just gonna go through those first and then the 2 pending ones. As a reminder, under the Police Accountability Act, trial board is made up of, I stumble over that one, a member of the public who has received training from the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission, a officer of equal rank to the accused officer. So if it's a corporal who has been administratively charged, a corporal will sit on the board. And then we utilize 2 administrative law judges employed by Baltimore County. A third is receiving training. So all 3 judges will be available to hear those cases. And as a further reminder, when the Administrative Charging Committee charges an officer, The ACC also recommends discipline in accordance with the Uniform Statewide Disciplinary Matrix. The chief can offer discipline in the amount that the ACC has recommended or a higher level within the matrix. They cannot deviate lower. The matrix is also available publicly and online. It's on our website as well. It can be circulated if anyone has any questions pertaining to that aspect of it. So these are all one of these cases is not an administrative charging committee case, and that's actually the first one. On February 14th, the trial board was convened to meet on an officer who was charged for cheating on an exam. That officer was found guilty. The next trial board was on March 3rd through 4th. That was, there are a litany of charges there. The plain English description of it is the officer was alleged to have falsified documentation pertaining to a bail review hearing. That officer was charged by the Administrative Charging Committee and was found not guilty of altering a court document or forgery. That officer pled guilty to the charges of not properly supervising the detainee. There was a trial board that had been scheduled for March 14th regarding violating Baltimore County Police Department policies in regards to electronic devices and for committing a misdemeanor. That officer resigned prior to the trial board's occurrence. And on April 15th, there was a trial board held on a departmental car accident involving property damage. So 2 vehicles in a collision. The officer was found not guilty in that case. There are 2 upcoming trial boards on April 30th. There's a trial board for an officer charged with excessive use of force and failure to properly report their use of force. And there's a trial board on May 14th regarding failure to take necessary police action. There will be more so, I'm sure, coming up soon. But I will say that they are being scheduled at a fairly consistent clip and moving forward regularly. And once we have the 3rd administrative law judge trained, that will help to expedite the process even further, as we'll be able to have 3 judges hearing these trial boards. Also wanted to discuss some legislation of note. I included this in a printout. It will be circulated to all members of the PAB shortly after this meeting. But this is all the legislation that was introduced in the 2025 Maryland General Assembly in either the House or the Senate as it pertains to the Maryland Police Accountability Act. They are listed, and I'm going to go through them all. I think it's worthwhile because each of these would have a significant impact on the PAB or the ACC or the trial boards or all 3. The first one, Senate Bill 532, companion bill filed in the House 537, is a police discipline order to show cause. It would have authorized a police officer who believes they're denied a certain right during the investigatory process to apply to the circuit court for the county that they are employed in anytime before a trial board. So if they believe there was a violation of their rights or whatever was collectively bargained for during the investigation process, they'd be able to request a show cause order. That bill did not receive a vote in the House Judiciary or Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. Senate Bill 533/House Bill 238, Public Safety Police Accountability, time limit for filing administrative charges. This is a significant change to the legislation, which was passed by both chambers and is awaiting Governor Moore's signature. The big picture change here is that presently, under the MPAA, an officer who has a complaint filed against them, either by a member of the public or based upon internal review by the department, they flag something as a policy violation that involves a member of the public. From that moment, the entire disciplinary process has 1 year and 1 day to be completed. So essentially that means the internal affairs unit investigates, puts together a report of investigation, submits to the Administrative Charging Committee. They meet, they deliberate, they issue a written opinion. It has to all be completed within 1 year and 1 day. The challenge that presents is that if there is a criminal case happening at the same time, where an officer is under criminal investigation, that process, if the officer is criminally charged, is extremely unlikely to complete within 1 year and 1 day. Because of rules of evidence involved in the criminal case, therefore, it is very unlikely that the Administrative Charging Committee in that scenario could receive a complete evidentiary file in the same way they would against an officer who was not facing criminal charges. Things like statements from the officer in an interview with internal affairs would be unlikely to exist in a case involving a criminal investigation. The General Assembly passed, ultimately the Senate bill was the one that passed, Senate Bill 533, which would have the 1 year and 1 day deadline start from the date that the criminal case is concluded, whether that means that there has been a trial, whether that means that the officer has made a plea, or there has been a determination by the state's attorney's office not to pursue charges. So in those scenarios, that's the date the year and a day would start from, which allows the administrative charging committee to review the evidentiary or the report of investigation with all available evidence to them, and avoids a scenario where an officer may not be able to be charged because the year and a day has run out while the criminal case is pending. Of course, if an officer is convicted of a felony, they would not be able to serve anyway. But it avoids that time running out. It also made several smaller changes. For instance, the internal affairs review of a case now, they have to submit their file to the administrative charging committee by, I believe it is 11 months prior to the year, within 334 days is the rule. So that ensures there's adequate time. And the ACC now has essentially 13 months from the date of complaint now to review a case. So they have 2 months after the Internal Affairs Division submits their report of investigation. They have 2 months to review essentially in those scenarios. So those are kind of cleanup and patching elements of the law that created potential headaches for cases involving particularly criminal investigation, and also addresses a concern Baltimore City had about reports of investigation not being submitted until shortly before the year and a day deadline. That has not been an issue in Baltimore County. Our internal affairs team has made sure that files get over to the ACC members several months prior to the year and a day. I'll come back to that part later. There was Senate Bill 625 / House Bill 885, Public Safety, Police Accountability, Investigation Records relating to unfounded and exonerated complaints. This would require that departments expunge records of an officer if a complaint was deemed unfounded or the officer was exonerated 3 years after the date of the ACC or trial board ruling. That bill did not receive a vote in the House Judiciary or Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. The next few bills were only introduced on the House side. House Bill 122, Public Safety, Police Accountability, Police Officer Complainant, would authorize a police officer to file a complaint of police misconduct with the Police Accountability Board. Right now, the only members of the public are permitted to do that. That legislation was withdrawn by its sponsor. House Bill 139, Public Safety Police Accountability Deadline for Completion of an Investigation. I alluded to this earlier. This would require the Internal Affairs unit or corresponding investigatory unit. Some smaller departments don't have a formal internal affairs team to submit their files to the ACC no later than 9 months after the filing of the complaint. This legislation did not receive a vote in the House Judiciary Committee. It was partially, or I would say significantly, resolved by the change on the bill I noted before, Senate Bill 533, which requires the Internal Affairs team to submit within 11 months of receiving the complaint. So it does essentially put some requirements on when IA sends over cases. House Bill 186, Police Discipline Trial Board Composition, would alter the composition of trial boards responsible for adjudicating matters of police discipline to include attorneys. This legislation was withdrawn by its sponsor. The idea is the attorneys would act as a potential substitute for the judges who chair the trial boards. Baltimore County, I will say, is very lucky that we have 3 administrative law judges. Most jurisdictions do not employ administrative law judges. They rely on the State Office of Administrative Hearings to conduct trial boards, which obviously takes time and resources. That legislation was withdrawn. House Bill 836, County Police Accountability Boards, Investigation of Complaints of Police Misconduct. This legislation would allow police accountability boards to review and investigate complaints of police misconduct, essentially running parallel with the internal affairs teams of the corresponding departments. This legislation did not receive a vote in the House Judiciary Committee. Finally, House Bill 985, Police Discipline Administrative Charging Committee's additional charging committee would authorize in local governing body. So in this case, in our case, would be the county council, most jurisdictions, the county council or city council, to authorize the creation of a second administrative charging committee if the local governing body determines that one is insufficient to serve the jurisdiction's law enforcement agencies. That legislation did not receive a vote in the House Judiciary Committee. So the only legislation that did pass
533.
is 533, Senate Bill 533, which tolls the year and a day statute of limitations of criminal cases and establishes a few other timelines for the Internal Affairs and the ACC to review cases and issue opinions. Any questions on either the trial boards or on the legislation of note? And again, I will be submitting, I'll send out and post on the website. I'll have Kelly make sure that all gets out to everybody, the legislation of notes. I know those who are online aren't looking at it right now. But that was those are the outcomes. Only that one bill passed.
There was a lot. Any questions from
Was a lot.
any members of the
You
PB?
should have brought water.
I had a question for Dawn. If this comes up again with the second charging committee, do you think that's needed?
Which one?
HB 985, the idea that we would have a second charging committee. Do you think that?
985, yeah.
Are you-
985?
The last bill.
That's what the last
The
one.
front.
Mhm.
It would allow for a second
Second.
ACC to be created.
If we
By-
have
I mean, it didn't go anywhere. So it's moved for this year, but is that,
I don't think it's like.
you guys have sufficient capacity?
Yeah, at this, yeah.
There are other jurisdictions
Sure.
that have a substantial,
Yeah,
a
it's
sub-
needed for other
Like,
places,
yeah,
but-
I mean,
Yeah. there are some that there is one jurisdiction that meets weekly for the
Yeah.
entirely of Fridays and handles and hears cases. Our county's ACC is able to 90% of the time meet once a month to review all of the files that come through, and in special circumstances we'll meet twice a month if there's a very large volume or some scheduling conflict. But
It would also be really hard to divvy up work because if you have 20 cases, one of those cases might involve 5 officers, so you can't just split it down the middle and say, this committee.
Yeah,
takes 5,
yeah,
this
I
takes
was
5.
making
Yeah.
sure that
I
you
think,
guys' volume is
yeah,
manageable, which sounds like it. So,
probably,
before we go
yeah.
back to the session again next year.
we'll have to, yeah. And any questions on trial boards?
Any questions at all?
All right. And as always, I'm happy to answer any questions people come up with afterwards or in public comment. I'm happy to share any insight as to the administrative end of things.
All righty. Thank you so much, Henry. We so appreciate your due diligence. You always add so much to our meetings. Thank you. We appreciate you. All right, next on our agenda, let's see, is old business. There's been a request from Mrs. Ritkus that we change our normal procedure today to allow public comment prior to our old business. I've had considered that request, and as an exception to the rule, we're granted today. So with that being said,
Mr. Chairman, one quick question.
sure.
Is that comment regarding the motion? And then we'll have public comment on any other questions afterwards. I think just for the sake of the meeting, it makes sense to have public comment before the vote, on the vote, and then after the vote, any questions about other PAB related topics.
Yes, this exception is for
Okay.
comments on the vote.
Great.
And I think that was the nature of her concern. No,
Right.
correct, yeah.
And I'm just going to ask for the sake of the recording, if any members of the public who are here today want to come up close to the computer just so folks online can hear. And I see Ms. Landers also wants to comment, and I know Ms. Richards is standing up to get over here. Then I'll turn it over to Ms. Landers and then any comment after that, if that works for everybody. And let me very briefly pull up the timer just so that we get any, oh boy, 3-minute timer. And I'm gonna go ahead and share this as well. Oh boy, it's already going. All right, so Kelly is off because her grandson was born this weekend. So we can all share thanks with her as well. But this is what happens when
But we always have switches on your secretary of skills.
Yeah, I am. Okay. Not without reason. Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick from District 1. Okay. All right, now we'll turn it over to Ms. Riskus. 3, 2, 1. There we go.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you about the motion before the board. I sent in a letter expressing some of my concerns, but I do thank you for a chance to speak on the record. To the public, including advocates like me who follow these issues closely, the Police Accountability Board's charge, and I'm quoting from your webpage, to improve matters of policing, to receive complaints of law enforcement misconduct filed by members of the public, and quote, to make recommendations on changes to policy that would improve law enforcement officer accountability in the county, end quote, clearly suggests that the board is both informed and active in advancing police accountability. But how can the PAB fulfill that mandate if it doesn't actually review the complaints submitted by the public? With all due respect to the County Office of Law, their opposition to this motion highlights exactly the kind of conflict of interest many warned about when the board was first formed. The county attorney's role is to protect the county from legal risk, not to improve police accountability. That is the PAB role as representatives of the public. The law is clear, and so is the public's expectation. The PAB's primary responsibility is to advance accountability, transparency, and trust, and that starts with reviewing the complaints you receive. So I respectfully ask that the board approve the motion to update the PAB rules of procedure to allow for this essential function. I also gave each of you, through the courtesy of Bishop, to a handout that basically.
You've got a little time if you want to read that for those who are online for us.
Yeah. Yes. My handout says support for the motion to allow PAB to review complaints, referencing the vote that will be taken by the board following the motion made at the February 10th meeting. To the public and according to its legal charge, the PAB role is clear: to receive complaints filed by the public, to improve policing, and to recommend policy changes that would improve police accountability. And I re-ask the question, how can the board do that effectively if it does not review the complaints filed by the public? And I restate my concern and our advocacy concern about the Office of Law. Their fiduciary responsibility is to protect the county from legal exposure, not to promote police accountability. That is the responsibility of the board. The law and the community expect the PAB to stand for transparency and justice, and reviewing police complaints is a crucial step. Please vote to approve the motion.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your input.
All right, now I'm going to, if I can figure out how to do this, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna go add Ms. Landers as a panelist, and then I'm gonna go back and share just so that we can have that consistency across. All right.
Ms. Landers,
Yes, Ms. Landers, are you, yes, she is. All right, you're currently muted.
Okay,
We can hear you now. All right,
great.
3, 2, 1.
Hi, everyone. Claire Landers, and I appreciate this opportunity to address you all. I'm very pleased with the good news that the number of complaints filed has gone down. And as I put in the chat earlier, I'm interested in hearing later if PERF is also considering functioning of police accountability boards as a measure of police effectiveness in looking at Baltimore County as a model for policing and practices. I have to be honest, though, even though complaints seem to have lessened or decreased, that as I listened to the disposition of those many, many complaints, it as just unfounded, knowing that three people, two of whom represent the police department's interest in reviewing those complaints, came to that conclusion does not build my confidence that things are being addressed as I think a member of the public would want to see in terms of transparency and accountability. If I were a member of this police accountability board, I would be very uncomfortable knowing that there were complaints filed in my district and I have no idea what they were about, what time of, whose shift they were on. Are there patterns of certain officers? Are there certain districts where most of the complaints come from? What are the nature of those complaints? This board is my eyes and ears. This board is the eyes and ears of every member, resident of this county. And that role requires they read what people are reporting and not just the code for what is being filed, and then whether or not it was accepted by the ACC is valid. I really, really urge you to build public confidence in this board and its function, and that it really is working well by adopting this motion to allow PAB members to review the complaints filed. Thank you.
I have a quick, just a clarification on that, as it pertains to the ACC membership. So, but Dawn read was the ACC. That's 5 members of the public, none of whom are members of Baltimore County Police Department or any law enforcement agency.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is and the significant that they receive 1 week of training from the Maryland State Police Training and Standards Commission. But again, no members of law enforcement sit on that that committee.
But how many
right,
members of the PAB serve on that?
1 member serves on the PAB and the ACC, and then there are 4 members of the public who, 2 of whom were appointed by the PAB and 2 of whom are appointed by the county executive who serve.
Well, that does not satisfy me in terms of strengthening the role of the PAB in this process. They should not just be hearing reports of numbers. They should be participating in this process more fully.
Thank you so very much. Point well taken. Thank you so much. Was there any other persons?
Public comment, yes.
Public comment?
Just,
Yes,
yes.
please.
Thanks so much.
Ready for me to count you down?
Yeah.
You ready to go? All right,
Give
3.
your name, please.
Yes.
Yes, Lorena Diaz, and I'm with the ACLU of Maryland.
All right.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis and members of the Police Accountability. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lorena Diaz, and I'm a campaign strategist for the ACLU of Maryland. I'm here today to urge this board to vote yes with a motion to allow the Police Accountability Board to review all complaints filed by members of the public against law enforcement officers. And just as a friendly reminder, we are also part of the Maryland, the MCJPA, the Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability, with over 80 plus memberships across the state of Maryland that worked really hard to make sure that the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021 passed. This board was created to establish transparency, accountability, and community trust to policing. This motion is a necessary, long overdue step toward restoring public trust, ensuring transparency, and aligning this board's practice with the principles laid out in the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021. There is nothing in the statute or regulations that prohibits the PAB members from reviewing complaints. In fact, the confidentiality rules in place make it clear that members are expected to access sensitive information, but must do so responsibly. The reference to an appointed member simply means that each PAB member must sign a confidentiality agreement, not that only one member is limited to reviewing these complaints. Every member of this board is appointed, and therefore each of you has both the obligation and the opportunity to engage meaningfully with this process. The law states that PABs are to receive complaints and to review the outcomes of disciplinary matters, providing recommendations on trends in the process. That work is vital, and it is only possible if members are fully informed and members have access to the underlying complaints and investigations. Without the access, the board is left with no real ability to assess outcomes, spot patterns, or make meaningful recommendations. Currently, only one board member, the ACC representative, can see those complaint details. Even then, confidentiality rules severely limit what they can share. The rest of the board remains in the dark. That structure undermines the very purpose of community oversight and leaves PAB members functioning without the tools necessary to carry out your mandate effectively. The roles of the Police Accountability Board members and how you do this work matter. The public looks to you to ensure accountability, not just through reviewing final decisions, but through the full process. The community has entrusted the PAB members with this responsibility for a reason. Voting yes on this motion affirms your ability and commitment to do the work you were appointed to do. It ensures that your oversight is thoughtful, informed, and impactful. Thank you again for allowing me to speak and for considering this important step forward. I urge the members to vote yes on this motion, or Baltimore County communities are counting on you, not just to carry the title accountability, but to embody it as well. Thank you.
Perfectly timed.
That was,
Thank you so much.
someone has been testified before. Yeah.
Yeah, very awesome, awesome. Any other members of the public? Do we have any?
We have no other members of the public unless Bonnie. All right.
Before we put this significant change before us for a vote, this is a major modification. We're talking about members of the PAB. Would you like comment?
Could we get clarification on what the language would be?
So the motion as read into the record by Mr. Fitzpatrick was the PAB review complaints submitted through the PAB website. I'll note that is the majority of complaints vast majority do not come in that way.
So that's one concern I have. It's such a minimal representation of the cases that we review that you wouldn't still get all of the cases. I also worry that it will be prejudicial to the process, because if I were to listen to a complaint before I read the whole file, it wouldn't be fair, because we read everything all at once from the ACC. We read the complaint, IAD's file, watch the body camera footage, read any independent evidence. And I acknowledge and understand the concern with hearing not charged, not charged, not charged, especially with such egregious complaints, such as sexual offense. What I can tell you is sometimes a complaint is 180 degrees away from what actually happened. And we review everything, spend hours reviewing just one case. So it's not taken lightly. And I hope that the public can trust that who they've appointed are making the responsible decisions.
Okay. Thank you, Dawn. Anyone else comment?
Scott's unmuted.
Yeah, Bishop Dennis, this is Scott Richmond. I'd like to comment if no one else in the room has comment.
Sure.
Thank you. I will note that I am opposed to this motion, and I want to make it very clear. I do not oppose the sentiment of the motion. I agree with many things that Pete has raised, from Ms. Richkis's email and what she said today, and Ms. Landers and Ms. Diaz. My concern, and this is to some extent as someone with an attorney background, is just the usurpation of the legislative process. I would completely agree that there is a significant misperception in the community, and even to myself when I began this process, as to what the ACC does versus what the PAB does. But I think the legislature, at least as the statute that we are operating under, is very clear. And I referenced the Public Safety Article 3-102. It only authorizes the PAB to receive complaints of police misconduct filed by members of the public. It does not allow us to review them, and it limits them to members of the public and not as complaints submitted by through the police department. I also looked at 3-104 for the administrative. Well, let me take a step back. I re-reviewed the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, looking at the legislative purpose, and I agree that many of the purposes that have been mentioned by Ms. Richkis and others, as far as police accountability, are well within that statute. And they also talk about each county having a police accountability board to take certain actions. I think looking at 3104, which puts the duties of the administrative charging committee, this is under the public safety article, it requires a certain kind of training that's been talked about, that an investigative file be forwarded to them for their review, and that confidentiality be maintained. My understanding of part of the reason confidentiality is maintained is when we cannot, as a PAB and as the ACC, go from an open session to a closed session. I reviewed the general provisions article of 305, and that talks about sub 13, when it is allowed to comply with a specific statutory requirement that prevents public disclosure about a particular proceeding or a matter. And 3104, which pertains to the ACC, discusses specifically confidentiality matters. There is no such provision in the PAB statute. To some extent, I agree with Dawn's point that there are very limited complaints that come through the public. So I don't know what, if any, I think benefit we would get from just reviewing initial complaint, and also from a legislative and a statutory interpretation standpoint, under subsection 4, which everyone has talked about, which we are required to identify trends, to make recommendations on policy. That is all subsequent to 4.1, 4 sub 1, which says viewing outcomes of disciplinary matters considered by the charging committees. So I don't think there's very much the PAB would gain from simply reviewing the complaints, which many times, as we've heard, have very little information without having the fuller picture. Obviously, we've received some information from counsel. I won't disclose that due to its confidentiality. It's one thing I take into consideration, but it by no means, I think, is dispositive. The comments that have been made by others, but I frankly think it's a very slippery slope to try to amend legislative action by motion. I think, as Henry noted, there were a couple legislative actions that were taken this past session, whether it was in parallel investigations with internal affairs, whether it was creating a second ACC committee. I do think there are opportunities for the PAB to have more information, and I'm not opposed to that. I frankly think that would be a good thing. But I think, given what the legislature has done here, and to some extent, my concerns about confidentiality, I wonder if there would even be a chilling effect if people knew that by submitting the complaints to us, they may not. I do think part of the reason that the opportunity was created to submit complaints through the website is to have an avenue outside of the police department. And I don't know about, whether, if that was not subject to a closed proceeding, if that could have a chilling effect. And I just mentioned that in passing. But I think from a straight legislative standpoint as to how legislation works, I think many of the points that have been made are very valid points, and I agree with many of them. But I think those are points that should be made with everyone's respective legislatures or legislators. For those reasons, I am opposed to the motion as currently offered.
Thank you, Scott. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah. So, thank you. I'll try to be brief. So I feel like we can sort through and review all of the words of all the various, legislations and precedents that we discussed, either, and were brought forward by council, and been brought up. All the words of all these varying acts, but in the end, I feel like the word that matters is the second one in the board's title, and it's the third one in the enabling legislation, and that is accountability. We're accountable for these things and accountable to the people. The board is accountable for the complaints it receives from the public. It cannot, in good faith, make good on that charge if it never knows what's in the complaint. How can we, in any kind of good faith, say that that to the public that we are holding the departments accountable for acting on these complaints faithfully if we don't know what they are? My letter carrier, brings my bills, right? And they're accountable for the delivery of those bills, right? But they're not, accountable to them being, paid or receiving a payment. I'm being held accountable. This job is not the postal service. The board was put here to be accountable and to ensure accountability. We have been charged with that. Like the authors of this legislation could have chosen any word. They could have chosen, advisory council, conveyor of complaints for that matter. But they chose accountability, and I don't feel that there's any accountability, for the complaints the public puts forward if we have no knowledge of them.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Any other members of the accountability board? I'm sorry, we can't allow redress.
I just have a rhetorical question, I guess. We reviewed them, it should pass. We reviewed them, they still get to say, what will we have accomplished? I mean, it doesn't change our mission. Having a training like the HCC has, so we hear these, what's the point? What are we gonna do with the board that the HCC is not gonna do? I don't, if we're just gonna listen to a whole bunch of just individual, without detail, without training complaints, it doesn't change anything. And it strikes me as idle curiosity.
Okay.
What are we gonna do? I mean, what's the point? What are you gonna do? So if you sit there and we listen to use of force, Wilkins precinct, making up stuff. Okay. Well, what do we do?
Okay,
The nature of that, she's asking the nature of your motion.
yeah, I feel, to that point, then, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the complaints are.
Nothing except that they give it information and say, oh yeah, okay, well, gee, that's.
So only know one side
Right.
in the complaint.
You wouldn't have all the details.
I would agree, but the public makes the complaints to the board. That's the nature of the job. I mean, why not just have a direct link to the police department's mechanism for reporting it? Follow. So what would we do with the knowledge? I guess it's, it is hard to say what we would do with the knowledge of something that we know nothing about. Right?
Therein lies my point.
Good.
You have and you have no means of making changes. Granted, yes, it might be nice for
No means at all.
come back with a statistical report that says, how much, again, went out. But I don't see the point again. If you don't have a means to do it back, and you won't.
This motion won't change our procedures anyhow until it gets to Annapolis. Am I correct?
It would require, we'd have to, I can't tell you that for sure. I mean, if it's passed, then we'd work to review them and do so. But it would change our rules of procedure. That would be the definitive change, and then we'd go from there as far as implementing that change.
Here for
Mhm,
Baltimore
yeah.
County. But it does not change what Annapolis handles.
It does not change the law. It would change our rules of procedure. And again, we have that discussion upon whether or not motion prevails
Okay. All
to
right.
make sure it's implemented in accordance with the majority of the board's position.
Just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody, Miss Nigeria, Stephanie, anyone else would like to comment before we put this before the board for vote?
No, I'm clear.
No, I'm clear.
Thank you.
I'm clear as well.
I'm clear as well.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so very much.
I'm clear.
Karen?
Clear.
Karen?
Yep, we're
Yeah.
good. She's good.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so very much. Alrighty. Let me just offer here at the February 10th, 2025 PAB meeting, Mr. Peter Fitzpatrick moved that Police Accountability Board modify its rules of procedure to allow for the PAB to review complaints of police misconduct received by the PAB. The motion was properly moved and seconded by Ms. Kara White. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call.
So Bishop Dennis, just so I can get clear, you said received by the PAB, it's the PAB from the public, not, for example, from the police department, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yes. All right. District 1, Mr. Fitzgerald. Fitzpatrick, I'm sorry. My bad.
Aye.
Aye, okay. District 2, Karen Williams.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Is that yea or nay? Are you making, are you moving to change it or remain as is?
I'm sorry. Remain as is.
So that's a nay. Am I making sure I'm getting you right?
Yes.
Okay. District 4,
That's a nay.
District 5, District 6,
Nay.
District 7,
No.
at large, Ms. Ford.
Yay.
I'm sorry.
That was a yay. Yay.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's a yay. Okay. And our other at large
It's not here.
is not here. Absent. All right. So according to our roll call, this motion has failed, and we will consider continuing the procedures as they've been. Right?
So now we do a public comment. I want to just jump in really quickly because I want to answer Ms. Lander's question from the prior public comment, unless she wants to restate it. I'll move her as a panelist now. But this was the question as to the role of PERF in evaluating Baltimore County's Police Accountability Board. I'll use this actually because I think this is a great, if you don't mind, Chairman, if I answer, because
No, not at all.
so just to clarify, PERF is a police executive research forum. It's a national organization that Governor Moore and his Office of Crime Prevention contracted with to analyze the implementation of the Police Accountability Act in Maryland. The PERF has, I believe they are operating through the end of the fiscal year when the grant expires. They issued a report last year that was, again, very nascent stages of implementation, more so looking at the law itself and looking at the ability for jurisdictions to adequately staff and fill their boards. That was the primary, and then and just kind of focusing on questions about, okay, well, is the training excessive? Is it not enough? Should the training be done virtually? That was their focus the first year. So back kind of administrative. My understanding is this year they're looking more at, okay, it's been 2 years since the law has taken effect. It is at a point now where they can be looked at holistically. There have been some, I know they've met with chiefs and internal affairs. They're meeting with PAB and ACC members via Zoom. I believe that email was forwarded out to all members to sign up. I expect there will be a comprehensive report issued at the end of sometime in the summer. At some point before June 30th, I would hope, before the grant expires, that will go over implementation. I expect that it will probably have some hard data that will look at the current acts, that will probably look at the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, which is the prior disciplinary statute, and how those compare. And I think I hope I'll be on the Zoom meeting as well, because they said they invited me too. So there will be information to PAB and ACC members about how that process is going. And I think, I imagine that will be probably a lot of what ends up being included in the report. As to the specific question of, are they looking at Baltimore County PABs? Ms. Landers, if you want to unmute, if you can clarify that, I may be able to answer it, but I just want to, what do you mean by looking at the PABs? In what capacity?
Sure. For instance, I'm sorry, every time I speak, my words come back at me, so it's very confusing for me to express myself and not be hearing myself at the same time on delay. Okay. So I'm curious if in looking at a community that has a PAB, they are assessing whether the PAB is receiving reading, complaints, and understanding people have things to complain about. What are the nature of they are filing in their community? Like, because otherwise it's just it's an email address. It is not an accountability process. That's what I can't get over here. Is that
So to the
they're seeing
question,
numbers and that's it. And is perf looking at that or assessing that? Otherwise, the fact that the PAB, in my view, has quarterly meetings or, meetings every few months or whatever, and what talks about things does not feel like a public service accountability process. That's just my feeling, especially when it comes to the racial and equity stuff. Because I think a lot of things happen that an internal, police process would dismiss, but people who are representing the public would understand and feel differently about when they read those complaints and have some questions about and concerns of their own, and it might track with their own experience.
So as to the kind of root of your question, I think the PAB will have more information about what data they've collected or are collecting and what they're looking at in the meeting, the Zoom presentation that PERF's performing. I can't speak for them, but what we will do is make sure that this report is circulated and presented at, hopefully for the June meeting, we'll be able to review it because I think it will be worthwhile to look at, again, assuming that everything is available to the public. I think that's a big part of understanding kind of where things stand and looking at what we're seeing statewide and in other jurisdictions, as well as in Baltimore County. I mean, I think part of it is that they're aggregating data statewide, but nonetheless, it will still be a good point of comparison between our PAB, our ACC, and I don't know if they're looking at the trial board process as much because I think some jurisdictions have not heard trial boards yet. We have because of the statewide backlog. My understanding is it's very, and I don't remember if it's how common that is, but I know some jurisdictions are a lot further behind than we are in rollout of that. So it will all be in the report as much as possible. We'll share that and make sure that information is available for the public because I do think that's obviously a huge part of looking at what Baltimore County is doing in policing is looking at how other jurisdictions, where they are as well, and if there are significant disparities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Landers. And much we're back, public comment. Yes, Ms. Ricketts, please. And come this way again. We can hear you. Will it be it? To the mic?
Thank you very much. Again, this is Peter Richka speaking. I am disappointed in the vote because I think it sends an unfortunate message to the public. And I will dispute Mr. Richmond's comment about what the legislation says. He says it does not permit the PAB to do this. On the contrary, it does not prohibit the PAB. And so I'm sure as a lawyer, he would know that if it's not prohibited, it is allowed. With regard to privacy concerns, which are confidentiality concerns, which are very, very valid, there are numerous laws as well as procedural practices that can protect the confidentiality of the information. But I remain concerned that the board members unless they're serving on the ACC or participating in trial boards, are not really understanding the situation on the ground in Baltimore County. And seeing what people are complaining about would give you some insight, because it's true that perception is reality. And so if the public's perception is X, you can't even refute that if you don't know what their perception is. So that's a serious concern. And as evidence of my or why I'm concerned about what the PAB understands is even on the police department dashboard, the wrong picture is conveyed with regard to the demographics of people who are complaining, who are charged, who are assaulted by police. If you look at it, yes, there is a category for Black, and there is a category for Asian, which is a very small portion of the population of Baltimore County. But there is a growing population of Hispanic. And are they now included in the white? They're certainly not included in the Black population. So I just worry that the board is receiving skewed information, and a lack of information is a further aggravation to that problem. I'm glad to hear about this report that is being done at the state level, and look forward to seeing what the results are. And I've said before publicly that it's great to know that our Baltimore County PAB is in the forefront of many things, including being organized, thanks to Henry and Kelly, and getting things up and running more so than many other jurisdictions. But that's not enough towards the accountability portion. And it's the accountability portion, as Pete said, that is the point of the board. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Alrighty. Any other members of the public? You good? Thank you so very much for sharing your insights and wisdom. We thank you so much. Alrighty. Any other old business? Anything that we have not discussed as old business?
That then. So on the dashboard for use of force, like two separate ones, use of force and just complaints. Use of force does not include Hispanic, and I don't know if that's because they don't account for that demographic, or if it's because there's cases. The complaint dashboard does. There is a number included for Hispanic. I just want to clarify, is that because there are none, or is that because they're not counted? They're counted.
I will ask BC Stat that and get an answer. Mhm.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Schiss, for flagging that issue as well. I can get an answer on that.
Great, great.
Oh, can I, one more?
Sure.
And is there a desire for a non-binary gender to be included in demographics? It's just male and female right now.
Okay.
That's White House, that's all we had.
Might be. All right.
All righty. All righty. Any other commentary? Any other thoughts from the board? Thank you so very much for your attendance today. Again, we apologize for getting a late start.
I apologize for the late start. That's an administrative end. That's not a board end.
But we got started. That's the good thing about it. If there's no further discussions, old business or anything, we will certainly take the motion for our next meeting scheduled. Let's see.
June 16th.
June 16th, yes, our next PAB meeting scheduled for June 16th.
I think Juneteenth is that, I think it's the 19th. I don't think we have it as a holiday. Let me,
Juneteenth.
that's a good clarification.
19th.
County. I'm pulling up our holiday closing schedule for Juneteenth this year is Thursday, June 19th.
Okay.
19.
But thank you for clarifying that because
At least the courts are.
quite frankly, it's kind of how we ended up having our meeting today, is that I didn't think that Easter
All
Sunday
right.
was over.
Can I get a motion to adjourn and with no further discussion? Motion to adjourn? Thank you, Renee. Probably move the second that we'll adjourn until our scheduled meeting on June the 16th here at 12 o'clock in the same room.
All right.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Y'all know we lost the Pope this morning, right?
Yeah.
Did.
Pope